Well, welcome everyone. Great to see you all here. It is a very important topic where health meets wealth. This is something that is really near and dear to my heart and my panelists here, and I think you're going to get a lot of great information here, so thanks. But first, to my amazing panelists.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with Tom West here to my left. Tom is a senior partner at SEIA, a national RIA, and a wealth management advisor working with aging clients. Next up, John Samuels. John is the founder and CEO of Wealth Worth, a New York City-based healthcare advisory firm. And John has worked with thousands of clients as they've navigated some of these healthcare impacts on their wealth finance. So here we go. Why do you care about this topic? Because financial security and healthy aging are closely tied together. You know, we're in a time of longevity, where people are living longer, presumably healthier lives than any generation before ours. And frankly, you could have 2 or 3 decades in retirement, which is about double what it was 50 years ago, and that is super expensive. Fidelity just came out with their number saying that a 65-year-old who retired this year at age 65 would have $165,000 in out-of-pocket medical expenses for the rest of during their retirement, which is pretty astounding. That's after Medicare. So, you know, medical and healthcare expenses are unpredictable. They are shocking on people's finances. And so the role of planning and managing, you know, financial planning as well as the healthcare costs in retirement and leading up to retirement is more critical than ever. So, you know, I want to just jump, and I should say one other thing. Everyone's talking about, oh, it's fantastic that inflation has come down, and isn't it great, it's cooled. But, you know, for seniors, people who are retired, the costs for in-home care and for hospital costs, assisted living, has absolutely soared, and there's no end in sight here. So I think it's a topic we need to get to quickly, and I'm going to start with my buddy Tom here. All right, Tom, why do I care about this? You know, why should advisors be paying attention to the health and longevity issues of their clients? And what's the big picture? Set the stage for us.
Well, I think the stage really is compliments to you guys showing up initially. When I was thinking about future-proof in my comments, you know, we've got the Fed meeting tomorrow. Interest rates are probably going to be going down. We've got AI impacting our business. But probably the most future-proof concept that I can think of is the clients that you have right now, the ones that you keep a year from now are going to be a year older. And part of the reason that I think, you know, I'm not your doctor, I'm a wealth manager, why it's important is because the transitions that families are making about new circumstances, new decision-making, new priorities about housing and health, what they're doing is they're rearranging the priorities, the most important things that really require perhaps more sophisticated or different financial strategies to address. The reason it's important is because the market of clients that we serve has changed. Questions and comments and concerns about health that get fielded by financial advisors, this is a signal to all of us that the way that our clients want to engage is fundamentally different than maybe when I started my career. Now, when you're thinking about, like, the Alliance for Lifetime Income came out with a statistic last year that said the #1 concern for Americans in retirement is affording and access to health care. And for the first time ever, that was #1 over running out of money. Right? So the market that we serve is changing. This is also happening at the same time that our industry is changing. Like, how many times are we hearing about net flows? And, you know, all of us have, from a demographic standpoint, a leaky bucket of clients that we know from Cerulli at the death or the disability of a first spouse or a second spouse. Advisors are not retaining assets. What we're going to be talking about today is how better attention, more sensitivity, being less of a bystander as an advisor, and being able to think about bringing ready resources to clients in transition. This is a way that I think that we can consider our book of business a little bit less of a leaky bucket and maybe we can evolve it into a strategy that actually helps us keep our second generation clients and retain assets in a way that's differentiated.
Thank you. John, what's an example of how a health advisor can work with a wealth advisor? So in other words, how does health connect with wealth in your view?
Thank you. So I spent 20 years in healthcare leadership. Before I started my firm, Wellworth, in 2016, I ran 17 emergency departments. And I saw a gap. What I saw is that there are great doctors and great hospitals and more choices for healthcare treatment now, but people aren't getting great care. So I started a firm to help people get better healthcare. And at the end of the day, the work that my team and I do as independent health advisors and advocates is mitigate healthcare risk. So wealth advisors manage people's risk and wealth. We manage their health. What does that look like? Help people find the right doctors, get second opinions, research disease, have a plan in case if there's an emergency, organize and steer care, make sure they have the right health insurance, and so forth. So I see people having a lot of risk in healthcare, and our work is to help manage that risk and get people the best care, and we actively do that, helping people find the right doctors, attending appointments with someone. We aren't concierge doctors. Concierge doctors, great. They spend more time with their patients, generally. Our work is to leverage our experience in healthcare to help them navigate and steer. So we are the quarterback of treatment. We go through a process similar to wealth advisors when we work with our clients. We go through a discovery process, what's happening medically. We assess what's going on. We strategize, we leverage our experts, and we support their care and treatment. We do that to mitigate risk, similar to what a wealth advisor does.
Excellent, thank you. Tom, you talk a lot about this idea of when you're working with your clients, you're playing offense and you're playing defense. What do you mean by that?
As it relates to the changes in health and the priorities that my clients have, I think of playing defense as how am I going to be retaining these assets, these clients, through whatever transitions might be having. And playing defense, I mean, we know just from the way our practices are valued, this is enormously important. You know, I had my evaluation in my practice done by a group called FP Transitions. One of the metrics that they use is how old are your average clients? So if you're going to take away two things from my comments, here's the first one. For all of us that are looking at your book, you need to know what your age-weighted revenue is in your book. And by age-weighted revenue, you need to figure out the head of household, how much revenue is attributed to different generational classes in your book of business. So for example, I took a look at mine. I have generally a little bit of an older client base because I've had this subject matter expertise in this healthcare space for a while. My age-weighted revenue was around 68, 69. That's higher than the industry average. But what this is showing, in my book of business, for example, about 19% of my practice's revenue is coming from age 80 or older head of household. All right? So the first thing that you need to think about is situational awareness. What does my book look like? Because if you can track the amount of assets that are likely to go through some housing or healthcare or cognitive or successor decision maker transition in the near future, you can track what kind of revenue might be dropping off. Now, if you're thinking about ways that really can make your valuation sticky with some expertise in this space, imagine having a really good second generation retention by having a differentiated experience as an advisor where folks that might have been dropping off in that 80+ range, because advisors learn a little bit more, because they're more present, because they can come up with ready resources, because they can engage children as successor decision makers in a way that they can develop a relationship where you're taking care of mom and dad. What I was able to test is last year, for example, I had an 83% second generation retention rate for clients that we had some service relating to changes in housing and healthcare. That is an enormous impact on my practice's valuation, for example. That's playing defense. Playing offense, I think, is something different. Most advisors, this is my second thing, most advisors, when there is a transition with their client, whether it's decision making, a fall, cognitive issues, most advisors will only treat that CFO spouse, the person in the family relationship as their primary client, like that's the wrong idea. You need to think about your client as a household, all right? It's not the individual that's engaging with you the most. If we can already think ahead that at the death or the disability or a cognitive issue that there's a primary decision maker financially that maybe goes through a transition, if the advisor doesn't have a role in a value proposition as that client is going through the transition, like you're out. If you want to know exactly when it happens that second generation isn't going to engage you, it's right there because you have nothing to say at the transition moment. I think that when I'm thinking about playing offense, most of my work comes from either do-it-yourselfers that can't do for themselves anymore, and you have successor decision makers that are coming in, and you got new priorities, new circumstance. I've got family roles that are all different, and all of a sudden I have to manage somebody's money. Let me go find an expert. But honestly, about 40% of my work is coming from other advisors that aren't paying attention to the changes in the household. So when I'm talking about a household as your client, here's a favor that I would ask you to do for yourself. The moment that there's a change in housing or healthcare priorities, I want you to think of this as a new client. I want you to go through your discovery process again. I've got new decision makers with new priorities. The hierarchy of most important things that dictate the job of the money, they're all different. The people that are influencing the decision, all different. Rediscover them. Treat your clients like a household, not an individual. You're going to be doing a much better job, I think, of retaining them.
And can I add a comment? So from a medical perspective, in medical care, transitions, strictly speaking, are where errors happen. Transitions, a patient goes from the ER upstairs to a room. A patient goes from their home to assisted living. A patient changed doctors. So strictly speaking, in healthcare, transitions are when errors happen, and from a health and wealth perspective, there's opportunities and there's a reason to support care and treatment, health and wealth during a transition. So a client we're working with moves from China to San Francisco, and they don't have health insurance. They don't have the right doctors set up. They're not sure where to go if there's an emergency. Their medical records need to be translated and then transitioned over, and so forth. So transitions are reasons for a time to get engaged from a health and from a wealth perspective.
I love that. And the other thing I was going to comment too on what you said, Tom, is this idea that, you know, health issues, when there's a medical crisis in a family, it's so emotional. And the ability to connect with the next generation who are making decisions for mom and dad is you're there at a time where they're quite vulnerable and they grow to trust you if you give them good guidance. And you can't pay for that kind of care.
Well, they do pay for that.
They do, but it is really important, and I know that that's a situation. Now, John, what's interesting is you started to allude to this, but you know, when somebody has a health crisis, like there's an impact of some sort that really rattles them, how can you help ease that financial impact on a person? How can someone who works with an advisory like yourself?
Yeah, so the work that we do, we start with a thoughtful process. And it starts really with advisors making sure that they're planning and budgeting for health advisory and healthcare support. So if there's one thing that I think you should take away from what I'm talking about today is the budget, $10,000 a year for your clients for healthcare advisory. So the first thing to do is the plan to recognize that you might need someone to help with a second opinion. You might need someone to help find a doctor. You might need someone to help set up home care or find assisted living, and so forth. So the first piece is to budget. The second piece is to know when to refer to a health advisor. After this talk, I'm going to post on my LinkedIn. We have tips as for when people should, what would trigger a referral to a firm like ours. So if someone comes to a wealth advisor and says, my wife was just diagnosed with cancer, my parents need home health care set up, I just moved and we need health insurance, or even a change in investment strategy. We had a client of ours call a family office at midnight recently and say, I want to donate $100 billion to the Met. And they know that they don't have $100 million in their account, and it was an odd thing. We were called, and we investigated, and it turned out he had a UTI, which caused him to have some mental cognitive issues. So from my perspective, the process is to plan, to know when to refer, to make that referral, and then to follow up and make sure that the team like ours or another expert health advisor is organized and aligning with wealth. And when we talk about health and wealth, we have advisors call us, and we had a family office call us recently and say, we need help with finding a home health agency. We use this one, all of our clients like it, but they say it's very expensive. So we looked at it and we said, gee, that home health agency only has nurses. So your client is paying $1.3 million a year for their treatment, and they really need a home health aide. So we made the recommendation to use an aide and not use that agency, and we saved them $1 million. So our work is to help steer the treatment as well as look at what's going on financially.
I would say that's a good savings. Now, we have a question from the audience. So let me interrupt here, you guys. I don't know who wants to jump in on this. Given the complexity of healthcare systems, how can advisors stay informed and educate clients about healthcare-related financial risks? Do you want to jump on that? Yeah.
I mean, I thank you for the question. I'm going to use this opportunity to talk a little bit about, this is a little counter-programming. I'm not a big fan of what I see out of a lot of companies and their financial wellness programs. Financial wellness where, the idea of planning ahead holistically for all the things that might be happening. For my clients, for my family, I think there's sometimes a little bit of a cruel optimism, and if you just take care of everything way in advance, it'll turn out okay. Most people are not prepared in some important way when something happens, okay? And I think that the better way, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty with the question, I think the better way is, how can you show the impact of ready resources in the moment of being able to deliver some real value? Maybe it's a relationship like John. Maybe it's being able to support a successor decision maker who's really not ready to make healthcare and financial decisions in their role as trustee or power of attorney. Like, maybe it's something along those lines. I think that you educate your clients better by walking them through case studies in real time for clients that you're serving. Like, I've got a client that had a fall and was discharged to an assisted living that wasn't the right one, and they probably need to have something different with a home care setup, right? How did I help out that client right there? I think that for most of us that are human, it's hard to imagine in the future me being a lesser version of myself. Well, that's true of my older clients too. I think what we really got to do is make sure that we're showing our families, our clients, our households that we're a ready resource. It's Johnny on the spot for knowing the right answers in the moment, and I think you educate them by giving your clients examples as compared to a curriculum.
So I agree. And from my perspective, healthcare is incredibly complicated, and there are lots and lots of hidden incentives, clinically as well as financially. Yeah. So patients are discharged on Fridays to clear the house because Monday's the busiest day in the ER, right? Patients are referred in a hospital to doctors in the hospital system because keep patients within the system, right? There's all these little incentives. You're discharged after 3 days of a hospital stay because they're not getting paid anymore because they're paid by diagnosis. So there's all these hidden incentives that happen, and there's no way somebody who's worked in finance can understand the nuances of how medical care works in so many different areas. I mean, there are lots and lots of mental health facilities. There are substance use programs that have websites that are beautiful, but there aren't MDs. There are peer educators and counselors and folks who aren't deep in medical care. So having an expert who understands the field, who doesn't have an incentive, they're advocates for their patients, allows people to get better care, and wealth advisors using someone else's expertise to leverage them helps. I mean, I would say, I don't think people should work on their own teeth or work on their car themselves or do their own taxes. Healthcare is very complicated. Having a team of experts who are independent helps those kind of complexities.
Here's your line. There is no fiduciary standard in healthcare, right? And I think that the idea of you having ready resources that can help clients in the moment navigate the path that's right in front of them, even in the ambiguity of an uncertain diagnosis or family members that are still catching up with your client's situation, I think that the idea is, listen, how can we improve our decision making in the face of unknown? I don't know how long somebody's going to live. I don't know how much care they're going to need, but based on what we're able to do, the next best decision might be aligning yourself with the right resource that can give some guidance on whether to go left or right on this healthcare and housing navigation.
But Tom, how can you help someone find someone like a John?
Well, I think that the first place is understanding I tend to focus very much on senior housing and healthcare. I'm interested in who's delivering the best outcomes for my clients first. I would probably say, because healthcare is its own, beast of an animal, try not to go into it thinking of who's going to refer me back. I think it's who's taking care of your client the best first, period. Then maybe the next level is, maybe they might know who I am and what I do. I'm not asking them to refer. Can you imagine asking a doctor to refer back to you initially? No, but if you are present in enough conversations, if you are there to show support of successor decision makers, particularly on the healthcare side, and you've got actually a value to add in these conversations, these healthcare and the housing professionals are going to start paying attention. Now, it's been 25, 30 years that I've been doing this. I think that I'm recognized with my expertise and my passion for this, but I think you start with who's taking care of your clients best, period.
But I think financially, it's so much more expensive than it was. The medical piece is enormous for people. It's the biggest cost in retirement for most people.
And from my perspective, in addition to what Tom wonderfully articulated, I believe advisors should have a checklist. I have a checklist of what advisors should have for their clients for healthcare. Documents they should have, understanding of at least copies of their health insurance, understanding if they have long-term care insurance, where, different housing where people live and so forth. So I think having that checklist and knowing that baseline information allows a team like ours to help support care and treatment when that call comes.
So you guys, we're down to our last minute. Da-dun-da-dun. I want a lightning round takeaway.
I want to quote my friend John Samuels. I think this is the most important thing from my perspective for advisors that he said. When you're doing your budgeting with retirement plan, put a slot in there for consulting services, whether it's medical or senior housing or healthcare. Put a budget item in there. It gives successor decision makers a jumping off point to say, listen, Dad and I already talked about this. You don't have to do this by themselves. We figured out a way to budget it. Let's make sure that we get the right connections.
Thank you. And, from my perspective, I think that you can do this. Advisors can have healthcare conversations with their clients. And, I say lead with empathy and communicate to them that there is a resource out there to help people navigate and steer their health care and do it independently and in alignment with the rest of the advisors on their team.
Thank you. Hey, let's give it up for my fabulous panelists here. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. We have 5 minutes. We're going to have another session here in 5 minutes, so feel free to go get a beverage. I believe they're serving ice cream over there. And then we'll be back to the future when we get back, talking about the future, what's ahead of ETFs. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.